Hi guys, my name is Christine and I'm a dating, relationship and personal development coach. And today I'm talking about watch this after a breakup. Okay, so if you've just gone through a breakup recently, then I personally think the best mindset to have is to assume that they're not coming back. Because what this does is that it helps you start to move on. It helps you start to, get on basically with the moving on process, right? Which is what you want. Because, for example, you may not know if they're coming back or not, especially if you want them back, right? You don't know for a fact if they're actually going to come back into your life, right? You don't know this. So you have to assume that they're not, because it's assuming that they're not is better than waiting by the phone and just wasting your life waiting for them to come back or not. Okay, you don't want to be waiting for them to come back because you do not know if they're going to come back. You don't want to waste your time, basically. Now, I don't mean that you should rush straight into a relationship or anything like that. I don't mean that you should be moving on as in go to a rebound or go straight into a new relationship or something like that. That's not what I mean. But what I do mean is that you just assume that they're not coming back, assume that the relationship is over, and you start moving on in terms of getting your head right emotionally, start focusing on different things other than romance at this time, working on different goals that you've got, getting back to who you were when, perhaps before the relationship, because sometimes when we get into relationships, we start to lose parts of who we once were because our life is now revolved around this relationship. So it's good then to get back to who you once was, getting back to that place, because that often really helps with the moving on process. Going back to spending time with your friends and your family, doing your hobbies, things like that, and just taking a time out, because you'll need a time out if you've just had a breakup, especially if you were together with them for a significant amount of time, so let's say like a year, multiple years. And I always say to people, look, if you was with someone for a year or multiple years, then you'll probably need a year or a year and a half to get over it before you start dating again. Right? Have that time to just realign with your goals and the things that you want from life, and that will really help. Another thing that will really help if you've just had a breakup is if you accept the breakup gracefully, right? Because if they've dumped you, right, then what you need to realize is that that person doesn't want you, okay? They wouldn't have dumped you if they wanted you, okay? They would still be with you, right? So you can't really convince them to change their mind at this point. You can't do that, because if they've already said, look, I don't want to be with you anymore, then that's where they are currently. That's currently where their mindset is, right? And there's no amount of you convincing them or trying to change their mind or begging or pleading that is going to change their mind currently. None of that's going to work, right? It will not work, because at this current time, they're happy and they're relieved that they've broken up with you. So if they were the one that dumps you, then it probably took them a while to build up the courage to actually do this, because a lot of people have this like misconception about breaking up with someone, that it's kind of like an easy thing to do. But it's actually not. It's actually really difficult and it's really awkward, and it's not a nice thing to do. It's not a nice thing, obviously, to be broken up with, to be dumped, obviously, but it's also not a nice thing to break up with someone and to break someone's heart. It's actually a very difficult thing to do. So now that they've bitten the bullet and they've actually broken up with you, they're relieved and they're happy that they've done it, because they've finally done it. And it may have taken them a while to build up the courage to do that. And what will make things worse is if you're trying to beg and plead and try and convince them, and what that's also going to do is it's going to turn them off you even more, right? Because it's not attractive to be needy and desperate like that. So the best thing that you can do is to gracefully accept the breakup. Okay, and it should make sense, right? It should make sense to gracefully accept the breakup and just be like, okay, well, that's fair enough. I want to be with someone who loves me, and if you don't love me anymore, then, well, I guess this is just it, and I wish you well, right? Because you shouldn't want to be with someone who doesn't want you. That's what you've got to realize. You shouldn't want to be with someone who doesn't want you. If they've said no, and they're like, no, I don't want to be with you anymore, there's not a lot you can do. They've made that choice, they've made that decision, and it was probably a difficult decision for them to come to and to actually execute, right? So if you try and beg, if you try and plead, you're not going to get anywhere, unfortunately, okay? In fact, you're going to push them away even further, okay? So if you're interested in how to get your ex back and you want to get your ex back, and you're interested in that, then I highly recommend that you go and watch this video on how to get your ex back, which is an audio. If you already watched that before, then I highly recommend that you go and watch it again, because usually when we watch or we read or we listen to something, we only retain like a smaller portion of the information the first time we hear it, right? So if you go through it again, you're going to be able to ingrain the information even better into your mind. Okay, so the next point I want to get into, which I've already touched on a little bit, which is to not rush into a new relationship. Okay, because that's really not going to benefit you at all. Okay, and what you got to realize as well is it's not a race. Like even if your ex has now entered a new relationship and it seems to have happened straight after the breakup, you don't want to do the same thing. You got to realize that it's not a race. Right, and I've seen couples do this. I've seen, someone get married, and suddenly the ex-partner suddenly, just after finding out that the others got married, suddenly gets engaged and things like that. And I've seen this kind of thing happen. And basically what it is, it's like they're racing each other, or at least one of them is racing to see how quickly they can move on than the other person and stuff like that. And it's such a bad way to go, and it's a very toxic thing to do. So just because they're in a new relationship doesn't mean that you should get straight into one. Like I said, it's not a race to the altar. It's not a race to see who can get over the other one faster, right? You should just focus on you and your journey and doing what's right for you at this current stage. Now, if that means going into a rebound, then, and that's what makes you feel good, then fine, maybe go for that if that's what you really want. But just be warned that usually going into rebounds is usually a bad idea. And it's not a very healthy thing to do, and it usually doesn't end very well, and it usually brings a lot more drama than necessary. So I don't recommend it, but if it's something that you're, hell-bent on doing, then, it's your life, right? But another thing as well about rebounds as well is that because you need time to get over the old relationship, especially if you were together for a long time, you need that time to process things. Right? Because if you don't have time to process the relationship and the relationship you just had in the breakup, you're going to be bringing old baggage into a new relationship, right? And you don't heal from it. So this was something that I've seen with someone I know personally, was in her old relationship, her and her old partner, they used to cheat on each other as like revenge. And then when she got into a new relationship with someone who was faithful, she did the same thing, right? She cheated on him to get revenge. Right, even though, right, he wasn't doing the same thing. But it was all because she went from one relationship, not had that much time in between, into a new one. And she brought all of the toxic baggage into this new relationship, right? So you don't want that kind of thing to happen to you. You don't want to be bringing old habits into a new relationship, which is why it's good to take a time out. Research dating, research relationships. I've got those recommended books in the description of this video that may help you with that sort of thing. But getting to really know that really, really well. So when you do enter a new relationship, eventually it's a healthy one and it lasts the test of time, right? Because sometimes as well is that if we don't get over the old relationship, we tend to be attracted to people that were like our ex. And because we're attracted to people that are like our ex, because we haven't fully got over the ex, we then enter a new relationship which is exactly the same, because we're attracted to, we haven't quite got over that person, right? And it always seems to be, you hear people saying all the time, oh, I always attract the same people. It's because you haven't got over and you haven't processed what has happened to you. Right? So getting a therapist or something like that may help with that kind of thing. Getting a good counsellor may help with that kind of thing. So it's a good idea to look into that if you need it. But also checking out those books will also help with that as well, if you want to be a self-starter and a self-learner, which, and that's a really good thing that you can do, learning and self-learning and things like that. Because a lot of the things that we learn about life and about relationships, we sort of do through observation of other people, and we don't really realize that, hey, if I just pick up a good couple of relationship books or a couple of dating books, I could actually learn some new techniques which are actually better, right? Because what I learned was that I had a really distorted view on relationships and dating when I was a teenager and in my early 20s, and then I came across these books about dating and relationships. I read them, I digested them, I did a lot of research online as well, started to implement the things that I thought worked, realized what didn't work, and it just completely changed my paradigm on dating and relationships and how I thought about them and how I behaved in them as well. So sometimes we can live through life not really realizing that there are other routes, there are other techniques, there are other things that are possible for us. So it's a really good idea to be a self-learner and realize that, you know what, just because I've got a university degree doesn't mean that I know everything in the world. And a lot of people do actually have that view. They think, okay, well, I've been to school, I've been to university, I've been to college, I now know everything. I've seen, you know, different relationships in my life, and they kind of just emulate other people that they've seen. But sometimes we don't always have the best role models for dating and relationship, right? And that's sometimes why we end up in relationships that are not right for us, because we're copying, we're mimicking bad models, basically. And that's a good book, actually, dating book, Models by Mark Manson, which is one of those recommended books that may be very helpful to you, especially if you've had trouble with dating, or you always seem to end up with the wrong people in relationships, right? So it helps you find a better relationship, a better quality person, and perhaps change your mind about different things and realize that there's actually other techniques that you can do, which are actually a lot more common sense and a lot more simplified than what you may realize. It's not complicated at all. Okay, so that may be something else you may want to look into too, so that you don't have the same thing happen to you again, right? We don't want to repeat the same mistakes. We don't want history to repeat itself. You don't want to end up being broken up with again or going through another breakup, because breakups suck. It'd be great if you can avoid getting broken up with altogether. It'd be great if you can avoid breakups altogether and find a relationship that lasts the test of time, and start learning some relationship and dating techniques so you can have a healthy relationship in the future. So another thing that's going to help as well, and I've already touched on this a little bit, but you know, getting back to your old life, right? To your hobbies, to your friends, to your family, getting back to the person that you once were, and see this breakup as a new exciting adventure, a new chapter in your life. Because a lot of people, when they go through a breakup, they think it's the end of the world, or they just think that things are never going to be as good as they once was. But that's only a mindset shift, right? That's your mindset. You can change your mindset to whatever you want it to be. You can see this as a new journey. You can see this as a new exciting adventure. You can see this as the new journey towards that person, a new person, right, in your life, who is way better looking than your ex, who is way nicer to you than your ex, and who you enjoy the company of more, right? If you can find someone who is better than your ex in every single way possible, which is entirely possible, right? Then you're going to easily forget about your ex very fast, and you're going to be feeling amazing about it. So thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to get in touch with me personally and you'd like coaching with me, then please go to www.christineloveridge.com, and I shall talk to you again very soon. Goodbye.